Patino and the coaching staff to try to figure out how to get the ball to Amir Coffey and Jordan Murphy, whether it's through running plays or just making sure that they stay aggressive and stay involved in the offense. I think that's a huge part of what we saw in the last two games.
Right, and I agree. I mean, he's got to be more a part of this offense. You look at the Maryland game. I mean, he took 6 shots. Wisconsin, 6 shots. Ohio State, 6 shots. There's a trend going on, and I don't know if that's Patino or I don't know if that's just guys that are, maybe stepping up. Daniel True. Obviously, there's more players that are being played now. Like last year was a very short team. Now they are playing a lot of guys. So maybe that's what it is. But they need to get him on track. He's very important to this team. Let's flip-flop here. Go to a guy that has just been outstanding. He's averaging 22 points in Big Ten play at 16, 21, 32, 19, and that is Amir Coffey. What have you seen that has been different from sophomore year? And I know he was injured, but how about the growth of Amir Coffey?
One thing back on Jordan, though, I think that if you look at the Big Ten, and this is his senior year, he really, teams have really not figured him out, but I think they understand really how to limit him.
Yep.
They attack him early and get him in foul trouble, and also, the length and the athleticism with some of the big men in the Big Ten has really given him trouble the past couple years. And I think with Amir Coffey, you look back to his freshman year, and he really was kind of unknown as far as the Big Ten was concerned. He was a big time recruit, but they didn't really know what kind of player he was, how to guard him, and he wasn't a main part of the offense, but he did. Obviously in non-conference, he showed that he was quite the scorer.
Yep.
Sophomore year comes around, and he mentioned that he was injured. He really didn't play too much, so I don't think Big Ten teams really even then were figuring him out. And I think so. Right now, Big Ten teams are starting to realize when Amir is aggressive, how deadly a scorer that he can be. And this is a good league. They'll make adjustments. I think Maryland did a little bit, but you'll see adjustments made in trying to stop Amir Coffey. Right now, I think the biggest thing that will limit Amir is himself. I think, and partly the coaching staff if they don't find ways to get him the ball.
Right.
In the Maryland game, you'd be surprised to hear he finished as the leading scorer, but he didn't score his first basket until under a minute left in the first half.
Yep.
So, and that's your leading scorer. Coming in, he was averaging 24 points a game. So, is that foul trouble? No, he wasn't in foul trouble. Is that Maryland's defense taking him away? Not really. If you look at the first half, they focused on him early, but when they kind of realized he wasn't really that involved with the offense, they kind of went away and they focused on Murphy and some other guys. So I think it's up to Patino to try to keep on harping to Amir that he needs to be aggressive from the start. And when he does, he can take over games like he did versus Nebraska, like he did versus Wisconsin at the end of the first half, and like he did at times in the second half versus Maryland. But again, it came down to making free throws, which Amir missed 5, playing defense, and obviously Maryland was just tougher down the stretch. So I think Amir's having a great year in the Big Ten. He's had some monster games, but I think for him, it's trying to figure out how to play well, scoring the ball for an entire game, and not just in stretches, because the team really needs him to be a little bit more consistent throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And what you said about, Amir can only stop himself, I think basically you're trying to say he needs to have the same mentality every game because he can take over games. He just has to keep that mentality and not wait until, obviously, the end of the half to score his first point. I mean, that's not okay for this Gopher team that needs him desperately. Let me give you two.
They were up 6.
Yeah.
They were up 6, too. So
right.
It's not the end of the world that he didn't score, but at the same time, you look at the Wisconsin game, and when he was aggressive before the last minute of the half, they were up 15.
Yep.
And they almost lost that game. They got down to 2 points. So I think, for the Gophers to reach their potential and actually, beat some good teams like they did Wisconsin, they're going to have to, step on the team's throat. And when they can, with Amir being aggressive, even if it means, other guys don't get as many opportunities to score.
100%. 2 more here. I don't want to go back to the negative vibe here, but a guy that was recruited right next to, my state, New York, Isaiah Washington, I look at him against non-conference teams, okay, and I say, okay, man, this kid can be really good. He's dishing out assists, but then I watch him against the Big Ten, and his body language, Marcus, when he misses a shot, it's like it's the end of the world, and it's affecting him. I don't know what's going on with him. Are these issues for Isaiah Washington concerning for you?
Well, I think the whole team has issues letting offense dictate their body language, poor shooting, and just how they play. I think they need to get out of their head that, that they're an offensive team. Everybody wants to score. This is kind of the Steph Curry generation, right? I mean, you want to shoot threes, you want to, see the ball go in.
Of course.
That's your, that's how you determine yourself as a player or as a team. But this has to be a defensive-oriented team. I don't think that it's necessarily Isaiah's fault, but he's just not a very good shooter. And, right now, and he works on it, he's just not very confident in his jump shot. And he's not the best defender. So, to me, this team kind of struggles to find their identity when he's on the floor. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't play and he can't play. I just think that he's a different kind of player. He's not a type of player that's going to lock down anybody defensively, and he's not a very good shooter. So you have to find your spots to put him in the game. I thought it was strange that they beat Wisconsin when Isaiah does not play.
Yep.
And they probably played their best game defensively for a pretty good portion of the game. And then they go to a different rotation when he's the first guard off the bench, and they try to throw him in there with Stahl, and it just the rotation just wasn't very good. And that kind of carried over to the second half, where they just were atrocious defensively. So I don't know. I think Isaiah is still a good player. I think that he deserves to get some minutes, but I think that they need to figure out a rotation that plays better defensively. And really, if you talk about Isaiah's body language, that's a big factor too, because you can't have a guy out there that doesn't help the team in that regard, because I think the entire team falls into that category at some point. And back with Stahl, I think Stahl is a better shooter than Isaiah.
Yep.
He might not be that much better of defender, but he's a bigger body, and he's a senior.
And he doesn't turn it over.
Right. He's a senior who's played in big games before. So I think Pitino has to figure out what kind of rotation he's going to have, and one that maybe, if they're not playing that well defensively, they're not shooting the ball well, really doesn't include Isaiah Washington until he can kind of get his confidence back shooting the ball, and then he makes improvements defensively. And I think that'll come. I mean, if he works on it hard enough, it's effort and it's understanding defensive principles, I think he can get there to be a better defender. But again, I think it's mostly defense with Isaiah Washington and body language. Those two things, I think, affect him in games and really hurt the team more than anything, because again, I don't think this team is a very good offensive team and jump shooting team. It's not just Isaiah Washington. I think it's across the board.
Okay, yeah, I agree. And this is not the last year Big Ten. This Big Ten is, 9 or 10 deep. You can expect to probably have 7 to 9 teams make the tournament this year. There are no easy games. You got to make sure you have your rotation set and ready, because you look at these next 3 games. This is my last question for you. Rutgers, who just beat Ohio State. So this isn't everyone, thought Rutgers is a joke, whatever. I think Peichel's doing a great job with his guys. Right. Geo Baker, I think he's really kind of starting to turn the program around. And you got Illinois.
Turn it around. I know you're excited because you live out there.
Yeah.
I don't know if necessarily turning it around.
Well, they were a laughing stock.
They're relevant. They're relevant.
Yeah.
They're not a team that you can take lightly in the Big Ten. I think that's how it starts.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're going in, they're not going to the tournament anytime soon, Marcus. I'm just telling you, they were a laughing stock. Now you have to take them serious. So they come in town, which you looked at the beginning of the year, and you said, okay, automatic win. They just beat Ohio State. Illinois is playing teams tough. Penn State, what do the Gophers have to do? Is it safe to say they have to win all 3 of these to get to 15-3? What are you thinking for the rest of the season?
It's a long season, but no question that the game's coming up. Even before they played Maryland, Ken Pom had them winning the next 4 games and improving to 6-1 in the Big Ten and 16-2 overall. And I thought that was huge, because you look at their last 10 games and they have 6 on the road.
Yep.
And Ken Pom had them losing, I think, 8 out of the last 10 games. And, obviously Ken Pom's not the end-all, be-all, but he kind of goes with a lot of different variables in win probability. And, most often he's right. He actually had Minnesota beating Maryland, so he was wrong on that one. But I think moving forward in the next 3 games, you look at Illinois, or you look at Rutgers, you look at Illinois and Penn State, 2 games at home versus Rutgers and Penn State. They're must-win games. I think these 3, it's weird to say this early in the season, but I think these 3 games are must-win if they want a chance to make the NCAA tournament realistically. Okay? If you lose 2 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 3, you still have a chance. Obviously, there's a lot of games left. But then you're having to beat teams on the road that you haven't beaten before in a long time, and you're having to win games that you're not expected to win. And right now, this team hasn't shown that it can do that on a consistent basis. They did beat Wisconsin, but they lost to Ohio State on the road and Boston College. So I think that these 3 games are critical. Can't go past Rutgers. You don't want to look past that game. And I think it helps the fact that they beat Ohio State.
I do too.
Now Minnesota definitely will not overlook this team.
Yeah, you could see them kind of sleepwalking on that Saturday morning game. But we're talking about the schedule real quick. I mean, after this little stretch of Rutgers, Illinois, Penn State, Marcus said it, at Michigan, home against Iowa, home against Illinois, at Purdue, home against Wisconsin, I mean, at Michigan State, this gets very tough very quickly. So we'll keep an eye on that. Marcus, thank you so much for giving me the time. Great job today.
No problem. Good stuff. Thanks.
Great stuff right there from Marcus Fuller. We've got Matthew Collar. We got the full slate today coming up next. And we're joined by Matt Collar of 1500 ESPN, Vikings reporter. He's my guy. He's going to break down the offseason of the Minnesota Vikings. I'm sure we all didn't think that we'd be saying this at this point in the season, but here we are. Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, so let's begin with I have a stance on the season. I know you've been all over Twitter. We've seen you with your rants and your articles. You've done a phenomenal job. Now it's time for me to give you my little spiel. I have a stance that it wasn't one guy or one moment that really defined the season. I thought they could just never get on the same page offensively and defensively. In the beginning of the year, you had the offense, which was great. The defense struggled, and towards the end, it was the other way. What is your stance on why things went so south this year? Like, why was it so difficult to get on the same page?
Well, I mean, it's a really long answer that we'll spend the entire offseason picking apart. But if I were just to check off a few boxes, I mean, one of it starts with hiring an offensive coordinator that could never seem to get on the same page with the quarterback and maximize the skills of the quarterback and also protect the offensive line in any way, shape, or form. And it's always seemed like John DeFilippo was in a different spot than Kirk Cousins and the rest of it. But I would say that they also just didn't get the throws they needed in the big situations. When you have 5 different games where you're within 1 score in the fourth quarter and you come away with 0 wins, I look at that as being on the quarterback, that there were a lot of 3rd down and 7s that created 4 yards that kind of remind you of the 2016. And, when it came to the poor offensive line play, I would also say that as bad as they were, the quarterback is allowed to still stand in there and make a throw, or he's allowed to roll out of the pocket. And when I hear people make that excuse for Kirk Cousins over and over, it's like, well, yeah, but he did have plenty of chances to make a big play, and when you look at the numbers, over 60% of his throws were not pressured. So what happened on the ones where he wasn't on a weekly basis where they needed a big play? And I think the no-shows in different games, the Buffalo game, the final game of the year against Chicago, that's what really cost them. They didn't need Cousins to go 13-3. They just needed 9-7. He couldn't get there, and that's been sort of emblematic of his career. So I think it starts with him. Where I sort of get frustrated is when the defense gets blamed, and then you go over the defensive numbers, and I can't find where they were a whole lot worse than in 2017. I mean, yeah, the team gave up more points, but 35 of those were Kirk Cousins pick sixes or strip sacks, and another touchdown was a blocked punt. So, when you look at how many points the defense actually gave up, they're at the top of the league. Yards per play, scoring percentage on drives, 3rd downs, red zone, one of the elite defenses in the league, and yet they still couldn't get in the playoffs. And, the guy with the ball in his hands, to me, is most responsible. But I think that where there's a difference is when I say that doesn't mean that they can never win anything ever again with Kirk Cousins. I think that's where the misunderstanding is. when you say the reason they're not in the playoffs is the quarterback, that's not